Welcome to Champions of White Ribbon, a series made by Congleton Radio for White Ribbon, introduced by me, the White Ribbon Ambassador, Stuart Neild. Now we've got Kay Wesley with us. I should say Councillor Kay Wesley, the first women's equality councillor in the country. How are you, Kay? You okay?
I'm all right, thank you. Hi, Stuart.
Now, you are a major supporter of White Ribbon. You're one of the White Ribbon champions. That's the females that back White Ribbon.
That's right, yes.
What got you involved, and what got you involved in feminism in such a big way?
Well, I think I like a lot of people. I had opinions on the way the world is, and politics and politicians and who the people who are running the place. And like a lot of women, I had experienced discrimination and sexual harassment and other everyday sexism all the way through my life. So, and I think for me, we talk about the challenge of violence, and particularly violence against women and girls, which is a major priority for the police and for the government. And but as I see it, there is a culture in this country which is the thin end of the wedge towards violence against women and girls. And I think people, half the population, cannot be equal and cannot be free and cannot be able to go about living their lives if they are in fear of violence from members of the other half of the population. And obviously, the vast majority of men would not be violent towards women at all. But nonetheless, we do have a great deal of sexism and patriarchy and prejudice in society against women. And that, for me, is all part of the same problem. So we hear guys talking about banter and making sexist jokes and things like that. And that kind of creates an environment in which harassment and more serious violence against women can thrive. So like a lot of women, I got very angry about this. And when a political party appeared that said it was trying to eradicate sexism and make the world a more equal place, I thought, well, that's the place for me. So that's why I joined this political party. And as I said, violence against women and girls is really the sharp end. We can never be equal while, there is this culture that can lead to violence and abuse of girls and women.
Some people say that you're on a crusade.
Huh.
If it is a crusade,
Yeah.
Is it because of things that have happened to you personally in the past?
I am on a bit of a crusade, but I think most people, people sometimes say, I have an agenda. Well, I think I do. I think everyone that goes into politics has some sort of agenda. You want to do something. You want to make change happen, don't you? That's why you do it. Otherwise, why? Why bother? So I wouldn't necessarily call it a crusade. I am very passionate. I'm very passionate about equality and equality of opportunity and everyone having a fair chance in life. And actually, not only gender equality. So, I'm a trustee for Congleton Pride. I do work on LGBT equality, disability equality, age, and other, and race. So I have a passion about everyone, wherever they come from and whoever they are, should have a fair crack at the whip and an equal chance. And they definitely don't have that in this country. People, we have much worse outcomes for people on, who are born into homes with low incomes and homes with high incomes. And, there are all sorts of inequalities in this country and in the world. And gender equality in terms of sheer numbers is the biggest because it's half the population. But of course, there's intersectional equality. 70% of single parents are women. And so there are multiple inequalities that some people face. And I feel passionately about all of them. And obviously, as, a sort of middle-class white woman, I have only experienced gender equality personally, but that doesn't mean I'm not as passionate about other inequalities that I see. And I want to eradicate those two.
I mean, the thing is about white ribbon, people tend to think it's just there for the working classes and not middle classes or upper classes. But how, violence against women and men putting women down, it's right across the board.
It is right across the board. I mean, we've seen politicians, who have used their position to exert pressure on others, staff in their office, for example, to have sex with them or whatever. So we have seen really bad behaviour right through society, and there are a large number of politicians who have been reprimanded for various behaviours. Dame Laura Cox wrote a report in October 2018, I think it was, and said that misogyny and harassment and bullying were rife in the House of Commons, right? So that's a huge problem, and I know the House of Commons has been trying to put in place mechanisms to sort it out, but it comes from this culture. It comes from this, toxic masculinity culture, if you like, that some men, and certainly not all, subscribe to. And obviously the majority of men want to treat people with respect and want to, and treat both men and women with respect and properly. But we do live in a culture where, negative and sexist attitudes are promoted by people in power and by the media. I don't know whether you remember that headline, "Never mind Brexit, what about Legsit?" With Theresa May, I think it was, and Nicola Sturgeon. We get this everyday sexism which objectifies and diminishes and belittles women, and that leads to an environment in which harassment and abuse and violence can thrive. And it's certainly by no means only people of one socio-economic sector. We have people in Congleton. A very articulate woman in Congleton came to speak at our council about how she was a victim of domestic abuse for 14 years. And she was, a middle-class mum, business owner. Anyone would have thought she was a woman with, sort of power, education, and she was nonetheless a survivor of terrible abuse. So you cannot look at a person and say that is a victim or that is an abuser or not. You simply can't. These behaviours exist throughout our society. And for me, that's what the White Ribbon campaign is all about. It's really about guys just role modelling positive masculinity, you might call it, to say, well, actually, you don't need to put people down and belittle them. And, along with sexism and sexist banter, you often get homophobic banter, you often get racist banter, don't you? So these things often, it's often the same groups or the same cultures that promote this prejudice against many different people. So I think White Ribbon is about the guys. It's not really, I'm a champion, as you said, but most of our activists in White Ribbon are men, and they're called White Ribbon ambassadors. And they say, well, I'm disgusted at these statistics about men's violence against women, girls. That's not me. That's not in my name. And I am going to sort of role model a different way of being and a different way of treating each other, and say, you can be a real man and be brave and strong and, and all those things, and still show respect to women and show respect to everybody. And so I think that's why I think the White Ribbon campaign is so good, because it's about preventing crime. We hear a lot of advice for women on how to keep themselves safe at night, how to keep themselves safe in different circumstances and on public transport. And I know in the Laura Cox report I mentioned a lot of women in the House of Commons who were working in offices were told, oh, just don't be alone with him. Just don't, make sure you're not in the room on your own with that one, because he's a bit dodgy. Chris Pincher was one example. I think Pincher by name, Pincher by nature, I think the politicians called him, the MPs. And, so there was a lot of advice for women about how to keep themselves safe. And you think, well, why are we doing that when actually what we perhaps should be saying is to guys, well, let's just not be sexist and let's just not harass. women. That seems sensible to me. And that's what the White Ribbon campaign is all about. It's about role modelling, being the good guys and setting those examples for young men and for all men.
Do you think the internet is an added problem because you've got the internet trolls, and you yourself have been a victim of internet trolls? I've witnessed that. I've witnessed, and I've stepped in over things.
Yes, I know. And yes, definitely. As a woman, not just as a woman in politics, but as a business owner and a commentator on various issues in my business life and political life, I do get trolls, as women do. And I think there's been research showing that women in politics and women in public life get, many, many more attacks and troll type behaviours than men do. And I think, the internet is a problem, but for me, that's just a channel, right? The internet enables people to behave badly anonymously. That's what it does, doesn't it? So you can be a keyboard warrior. No one knows really who you are, and it's easier to get away with some of those behaviours. But still, it's just behaviour. At the end of the day, those same people might, be behaving, talking to their mates in the pub in a similar vein about women and girls. Then, they might have private messaging groups in which they chat, say things that are not appropriate. So I guess you can look at the channel and say, the internet's a big problem. But really, it's the behaviour that's the problem, regardless of whether it's online, offline, in the pub, in the shop, in the street. We still need to look at those behaviours and say, do you know what, this is not okay. And people like Andrew Tate and, some prominent celebrity guys who have behaved badly, and they have huge followings. And often those followings of quite young men who perhaps haven't found, searching for their place in the world, you might say, at quite a vulnerable age, young men and boys. And if they're getting their attitudes towards women and towards other people from people like Andrew Tate, some of these really prominent misogynists, then that is very, very unhelpful. So White Ribbon is about saying, let's have some prominent guys who are behaving well, who are showing what the way we ought to be. And if we normalise those behaviours more, then hopefully we'll see less sexism, less harassment and less abuse and violence too.
How does it feel to you, and how does it affect you when these people troll you for being a women's equality councillor? How does that feel at a personal level? It must hurt, because I've spoke to a lot of councillors and politicians, and although they can be thick-skinned, it does tend to hurt.
Yes, you do have to be very thick-skinned, and it does definitely hurt. I used to, in the early days, I guess I engaged more. So I would try to persuade the person of my way of thinking, or, have rational arguments. But honestly, people that behave like that, there really is no point in trying to have a rational argument with them, because they're not going to change their view. They're going to goad, and I think part of the objective is to upset you. So nowadays, I take a slightly different view. If I think of them as being like small children. So if you had a small child, sometimes, you've got kids. Sometimes when your kid is small, your child's small and has been misbehaving, they'll turn around and they'll say, I hate you. I hate you, you're ugly. Or, they say childish things, don't they? Yeah. Which are not really true. But they just say things because that's the way, because they don't know any better. So I think that's my attitude now to the trolls. I sort of feel like they have they're ill-informed, and they don't really know what they're doing. And if they were better informed, then maybe they would behave better. So I try to look at it as almost an inability that they have to see, the fair and real world, and I try to feel sorry for them rather than, going head to head or letting them upset me, just as I don't let the child upset me that says I hate you, because I know that's nonsense. I know that some of the things that are said to me online are nonsense, and I just think, well, poor ignorant you. And obviously I block people and things. You have to look after your own mental health, don't you? But so I do occasionally block people when it's getting silly, but generally speaking, I just try to feel sorry for people who have those attitudes.
And you're not the only one to suffer this. I mean, when we've talked about the House of Commons, our own MP, Congleton MP, Fiona Bruce, she's been trolled many times on the internet, and there's been some dreadful things said about her.
Yeah, she has, and and all MPs do. And I mean, I disagree with Fiona Bruce on almost every policy and every vote that she's made in the House of Commons, but I would never troll her or call her personal names or make personal attacks. I mean, what's the point? That's not the way. That is just not the way to do business in the world. And you have to accept that people have different opinions and respect that, and then get on with it and make the case for your opinions and your views, and just argue in a respectful way. So as I said, I do disagree with a lot of what Fiona Bruce does, but hopefully she won't be doing it for very much longer.
It must though. It must get you though when you think there's a female that's got into the House of Commons. She's in the government, even though you don't agree with her policies. It must be awful for you to see the abuse that she does get from certain Congleton residents.
I agree.
Residents that you could be representing at a council level. That must feel awful to you as well. And I think I almost feel ashamed for the ones that do that to her and goad her and name call, and I feel
I agree.
ashamed of them.
It's completely unacceptable, and Fiona Bruce should not have to put up with that. No woman in public life should have to put up with that. No one in public life should have to put up with that. But particularly women, as you say, do get personal attacks. And I think when you resort to personal attacks, you've lost the argument. Funnily enough, I think it's another antithesis of mine. Margaret Thatcher said that, didn't she? I didn't agree with anything she did either. But I do agree with that point. That if you resort to personal attacks, it means you haven't got a rational argument left. Yeah. So you've lost. You've lost basically. So and that's my view. So yes, people shouldn't have to put up with it. Platforms should deal with it more effectively than I think they do sometimes. They don't always handle it very well. But certainly, and it's obvious what is bullying and what's a personal attack and what is reasonable debate. I mean, no one wants to shut down debate, and I can have as vigorous a debate as the next person. But as soon as you start calling people names, then, really, that's the end as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going to have a conversation with you. And it is a particular problem that women face. I think, in everyday life, a lot of women will describe being talked over. So it's not just actual personal attacks. So a lot of women at work, particularly, in sort of office or corporate settings, all women have experienced being talked over, interrupted and talked over by men, and also having their ideas stolen. So often, you suggest an idea and 5 minutes later a man suggests it and then everybody listens to it. So, there are small and sort of everyday things that women put up with that I think are actually quite sexist, and they're all part of the same thing. There are the mayor. I'm a deputy mayor at the moment in Congleton, so I've been to some civic events, and I've had mayors in other towns come up to me and want to kiss me, and I think, well, I don't know who you are. Why would I want to kiss you? But there's this kind of God-given right to kiss you because they're the mayor. No, that's not how it works. And I think white ribbons about all of these small things as well. Not just the big things, not just the trolling, not just the violence. It's about saying, well, actually, women are entitled to space. They're entitled to be asked whether or not they want to be kissed or not, and things like that. So I think the White Ribbon ambassadors talk about all of that, and so do I, because I think, there's no way in a million years a woman mayor would think, when Margaret Gartside was our mayor last year, she didn't go about kissing all the men, thinking that she had a right to do it, and that would have seemed outrageous if she'd done it. Yeah. And yet, it's happened to me this year from other mayors in other towns. I have to say, not our current mayor, Robert Morton, but in other towns that has happened. So, we do have double standards, don't we, for men and women? And I think we need to just think about those things.
Well, I can say I interviewed Margaret Garside a few times, and she never kissed me once. So I can go on record with that. But I mean, how does that make you feel, Kay? When you're deputy mayor, you more than likely be the mayor next year. How does that make you feel that other mayors are coming up, try and kiss you? How does that make you feel at a personal level?
It's kind of a power play, isn't it? You wouldn't, and it's that same, in the workplace and things. It's the more powerful people that feel that they have a right to touch the less powerful people. So that's what it is. And I think, so when it happens to you, you kind of feel very embarrassed and kind of disempowered, because it seems rude to push somebody away and say, no, I don't want that. It just seems rude, and we're also programmed into not being rude and not upsetting anybody, aren't we?
Do you feel vulnerable?
It can be a difficult moment. Yeah, you do. You just feel vulnerable.
Yeah. You're in a position. You're put in a position, aren't you?
You're put in a position where you are more vulnerable and smaller than the person who is doing that to you, and it immediately kind of creates a situation in which that person has more power, and that's not okay. That's not how to treat people. And sometimes I do sort of dodge or push people away, but sometimes it kind of happens so quickly you don't have time to think, why? What are you doing? I don't want to kiss you. I don't know who you are. So I think it's that's just an example, but it's in everyday life. There are a million little examples that a lot of women could cite, and I think it's just thinking about those things. And I think the White Ribbon ambassadors that I work with have said to me, oh my goodness, I noticed so much now that I didn't notice before, because they've gone through the training and they're just in everyday life. And I noticed the disparaging thing that my brother said about, his female colleague, or I noticed this or I noticed that. And I think once they tuned into it, they're kind of outraged. And you're an ambassador too, Stuart, aren't you? And, once you start noticing this everyday sexism, you start thinking, oh my goodness, it's everywhere, and you get sort of tuned into it. And as you know, the other ambassadors like yourself are just angry about it and just saying, come on, this has got to change. This isn't how guys should be behaving. And obviously, as I said, the majority of guys behave very well all the time. But it's really just about making sure that we extend that, and that we don't normalise the small sexism, because that kind of gives permission for the bigger problems to thrive.
I mean, I think the thing is, it's like you've obviously had some bad experiences there, and like you said, not all mayors have gone for kiss you, but if it's just like one or two, you must be thinking, what the hell is happening here? And this is at such a higher level that you wouldn't think that would be happening.
No, exactly. Well, I mean, like a lot of women, I've had it all through my life, Stuart. So, my very first job, there was a guy at work that used to touch my bum at work, and thought it was okay when no one was looking. And I gave him a piece of my mind, told him I was going to report him. And but it was having spoken to other women in the place, he was obviously been doing that for years, to women. He was known, he had a nickname, and he that's what he did. I had another boss that just only ever talked to women's chest. Everybody knew him as well. My friend worked with a guy that everyone called the knicker flicker, because he was always touching women at work, and this is this is, all women have these stories, all women have seen these things and experienced these things. I've been followed down the street by weird guys at night. Even, in recent years, I've been propositioned by guys in pubs that I've never seen, that I don't know, who think, who caught me glancing at them and saw that as a come on and kind of lurch over and think that they're on a promise. And, I've had loads of experiences, as all women have, just in everyday life. And not only that, I had a boss in a big corporate who told me I was too emotional to be a leader, that I wasn't really leadership material. So, of course, I started my own company, which is going very nicely now, thank you. And I seem to be leading it okay. We just won Employer of the Year at East Cheshire Chamber of Commerce, thank you. So, but those attitudes as well, are also unhelpful. It's not only abuse and physical harassment, it's also putting you down in various different ways because you're a woman. So the White Ribbon ambassadors and I try to sort of change the story. That's this year's theme, isn't it, for White Ribbon Day?
Yeah.
So trying to change the narrative. It's not that, women are weak and emotional and vulnerable and men are strong and dominant. And, we need to have a different narrative and a more equal narrative so that people can just get on with their lives and everyone respects everyone else.
Do you think these experiences that you had in the past made the Kay Wesley of today, this White Ribbon champion? Do you think that's what it was? That fueled you?
Definitely.
You thought, change, I'm not putting up with this. You thought, where some women have in the past just gone along and thought, well, that's how it is. You just turned around and said, no, I'm not having this. And
I think you've hit the nail on the head, yeah. And I suppose that combined with my kind of, what I said earlier about, I hate unfairness. I hate it when people don't have an equal shout. Yeah. Not only women, but people in general. So, if you combine that idea of wanting everyone to have a fair chance in life with the experiences that I've had, you can understand why I'm so angry and so determined to make change happen, not only for women, but for everybody. But because actually this culture it isn't very good for anybody. It isn't very good for men either. Men have sisters and daughters. I was talking to someone the other day who has 4 daughters, and he's really passionate about White Ribbon. He wants to become an ambassador. And he said, I want my daughters to live in a world where they're safe and equal and respected. So I think, equality is really better for everyone. And so I think my own personal experiences of inequality have obviously fueled that. But it does make me think that, we should be working on equality in every respect. And of course, toxic masculinity and some of these attitudes, they're not very good for men either. We hear a lot about the fact that men who have mental health problems struggle to address their problems and talk about them. And unfortunately, the suicide rates amongst young men aged 25 to 40. And there is help in Cheshire East. There is a mental health helpline. So if people are concerned about that, please phone the helpline. And you can get immediate help. But we hear about these things, and often the reason men have difficulty, or some men have difficulty dealing with poor mental health, is the same thing. The same sort of toxic masculinity and the expectations that, man up, don't be such a little boy, big boys don't cry, and all those pressures on men to behave in a certain way, in a certain mould, actually negatively affects them as well. And the White Ribbon campaign is about challenging those attitudes which really adversely affect men as well as women. And if we look at violence, people say, what about knife crime, and what about, murder and other sorts of crime? Well, in the world, 96% of all murders are committed by men. So even if you're a male victim of violence, you're probably a victim of another man. So, let's separate the idea of manhood and being dominant and violent. You don't have to be, that kind of person in order to be a real man. So if we kind of change this definition and make a more positive future, affirm or positive masculinity, then that will benefit everybody.
It's not too much to ask, is it? Equality for
No.
all. It's not too much to ask.
Pretty simple, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, Kay, thanks for coming on and talking to us. We really do appreciate it. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me. And White Ribbon Day, as I'm sure you know, is the 25th of November. And everybody will see the flag flying on the town hall, the white ribbons on all the lampposts, and you and our White Ribbon ambassadors will be out and about talking to people about it. So I would encourage everyone to make their White Ribbon promise and join in with the campaign. Thanks for having me on, Stuart.
Thanks a lot, Kay.